Chapter 1, Jump into the Sea. Far away from the shore, a private luxury cruise ship was moving slowly across the sea. The sea was like a roaring tiger, churning tumultuously just like Tan Aining's present emotions. She was extremely frustrated like a tiger. She was in a casual white t-shirt and jeans, standing on the very edge of the deck on the cruise ship. One step backward and she would directly fall into the deep sea. What was worse, her right shoulder and left thigh were bleeding after being shot. She was trembling and teetering, but still struggled to remain standing there. How brave and determined she was. Actually, 2 shots weren't severe enough to make Tang Aining tremble and teeter. She lost lots of strength because she had been drugged earlier. Otherwise, they could not have captured her that easily. A man and a woman were the heads of a group of people standing against her. The woman was in a white strapless dress with dark red curly hair, heavy makeup and looked seductive. Her eyes were full of joy. While the man, who was in a white suit, was around 30 years old and extraordinarily handsome. The two stood close to each other in ambiguous posture, seeming debauched. Behind the man and woman were 7 or 8 bodyguards, all in black suits. However, the man who was in white suit had an air of coldness. His eagle-like eyes were fixed on Tang Aining, who was standing right before him. The handgun aimed at her. He was ready to shoot. And the 2 shots to Tang Aining were from the man too. Why? Tang Aining squeezed her voice out of her teeth. Her bloodshot eyes were full of endless anger, pain, regret and hope. She stared at the man and the woman who looked pretty close. Why? Interesting, the woman, whose name was Tang Yaxin, snorted with laughter like she had heard a ridiculous joke. Tang Aining, you still can't see it clearly, can you? To tell you the truth, I am the person Zhu loves from the beginning to the end. And you're merely a tool to him. That's the reason why Zhu was unwilling to sleep with you for the last 2 years. You, Tang Aining choked. If sight could kill people, Tang Yaxin and Chizu, who were standing in front of her, would be chopped into pieces already. Tang Yaxin, Tang Aining's half-sister, was 2 years younger than Tang Aining. 10 years ago, due to the appearance of Tang Yaxin's mother, Tang Aining's mother had mentally broken down because of anger, encountered a car accident, and had been in a vegetative state till now. At the same time, Tang Yaxin together with her mother, the mistress, had entered the house. As for Tang Aining, she had been dumped by her father to a dark killer organization for training. And she had been doing many dirty deeds for the Tang family afterwards. Tang Aining was surely reluctant, but her mother was in her father's hand. As long as she dared to disobey, her mom would be killed. Chizu, although having an ordinary background, he was still outstanding. Tang Aining, who had always been clever but were deceived by that hypocritical man. Tang Yaxin, on the other hand, couldn't care less about Tang Aining's irritation. She continued. Dad knows once your mother is dead, he'll lose control of you. Thus he deliberately sent men to chase you, to make you fall in love and be willing to do whatever he wants. Unexpectedly, you ignored so many men, but precisely chose my man because of an accident. And I had to sacrifice my man to act with you for Tang family's good. While Tang Yaxin was saying, she wore an upset face. Even though she was pretending, she was still attractive. Chizu, who was standing beside her, comforted, baby, no worries, I'll stay by your side from now on, and I'll never leave you alone at night again. Absolutely. You, no matter your body or heart, belongs to me, and me only. Tang Yaxin replied in her coquettish voice, painting circles on Chizu's chest with her finger. She was flirting with him, which made the man sexually excited and distracted. If they hadn't been in the middle of something important, he would have pressed Tang Yaxin under his body and fucked her violently. Disgusting. Tang Aining felt more disgusted than hurt by the scene. If she hadn't been aimed by a gun, she would never have allowed the two being so shameless before her eyes. You, Tang Yaxin's expression changed upon hearing Tang Aining's words, but before she was able to argue back, Chizu interrupted, baby, don't be annoyed. She's doomed. It's not a big deal to let her struggle by words. Tang Yaxin calmed down after Chizu's explanation, you're right. Actually, I don't want to deal with her at such an early stage, but she already found out her mother's death. Anyway, I have to say she has a really intimate relations with her mother. She even betrayed the Tang family, and you, for her mother." After a short break, Tang Yexin added, "Tang Aining, since you've done a lot for the Tang family, I'll give you two choices. 1, you can jump down alone, and 2." Tang Yexin wore a meaningful smile. 2, you can have fun with my fellows, and enjoy the feelings from a girl to be a woman before your death, how's that?" Tang Aining clenched her fists, and her face turned displeased. She stopped struggling at the end, for now she had no choice but to die. Although she was able to hurt Tang Yexin before her death, she also knew it clearly that if she had been caught, she would be humiliated and raped by all of those bodyguards, which was unbearable to her. So, Tang Aining sneered at Tang Yexin and Chizu, saying coldly, "If I will be alive, I'll definitely pay you back." Tang Aining's words were like a curse. Tang Yexin and Chizu felt threatened and chilly immediately, as if the curse would come true one day, but before they could react, Tang Aining jumped into the rough sea directly. Tang Aining's body kept sinking downwards. She fell into unconsciousness gradually, but suddenly, she saw the jade pendant on her chest shine in red light, then she completely lost consciousness. City F, a third-tier city in this country. In a common patient room of the central hospital, there were 4 beds, but only the right one against the wall was occupied. On the patient bed was a girl, who was 17 or 18 years old. Her head was wrapped in gauze bandages. She was a pretty girl with beautiful features, but wore a solemn face, fixing her eyes at the news being played on the TV. Chapter 2, A Reborn Female Student. The news was saying a female body had been found in the Sea of City B last afternoon. The dead was around 25 years old. According to the investigation, the dead was exactly the industrial espionage and killer that the police was chasing after today. While watching the news, the teenage girl still seemed serious. Nobody knew the teenage girl's soul had already been coincidentally replaced by the soul of the female body on the news. Yes, Tang Aining had been reborn. Was that unbelievable? But it was what it was. Even Tang Aining, who was proud of her excellent adaptability, had spent a whole morning to accept and face the reality. But since God had let her be reborn, undoubtedly, she would fulfill her oath of the last lifetime. If she could be alive, she would definitely pay Chizu and Tang Yexin back. So, Chizu and Tang Yexin, let's wait and see. Tang Aining was back. She was back for the Tang family who had killed her mother and used her for so many years. The body Tang Aining was reborn to named Guning, 18 years old. She was born in a normal one-parent family, and her mother gave birth out of wedlock. Because of that, the mother and the daughter had been humiliated and disdained by their relatives for a long time. As for Guning, she was always called the bastard. Besides, the schoolmates despised, isolated and bullied her as well, which was the reason why Guning was self-abased, introverted, weak and inarticulate. Guning's mother, Guman, was a common factory worker due to her lack of a college degree, earning around several thousand yuan per month. They lived a very hard life. Guning was a senior studying in a high school of City F. It was just a semester away from the National College entrance examination. However, Guning was not academically inclined, so it was difficult for her to be accepted into college. And their relatives had laughed at them about that. Someone even pretended to persuade Guning to marry a random man after the exam for Guman's good. But upon thinking of the reason why Guning was in hospital, Tang Aining turned displeased with her eyes showed slight anger. Probably because they had encountered the same problem. Guning had had a boyfriend before she was in hospital. They had dated for 2 months. Her boyfriend named Qinjing, a student in the top class. Qinjing was a handsome, outgoing boy, and also good at studying. He was born in a rich family. His father was the head of the tourism bureau, while his mother was a director of obstetrics and gynecology department in the hospital. Qinjing was a son of the authorities. It had been beyond Guning's imagination that such an outstanding boy would have chased her. Most importantly, Guning had secretly fallen in love with Qinjing for a year. Although Guning had known they didn't match, she had been unwilling to reject. A few days later, she had accepted. But everything had come to an end right away yesterday. Yesterday had been a Friday. Qinjing had asked Guning out for a meeting. Guning had believed it must be a date, but to her surprise, Qinjing had appeared with Gu Xiao, and he had said he wanted to break up the minute they had met. Gu Xiao, the daughter of Guning's uncle, was half a year Guning's senior. While growing up, Gu Xiao had been instilled by her parents that Guning was a bastard. Moreover, Guning was more than beautiful than her. Thus bullying Guning was always funny to Gu Xiao. Guning, Qinjing never liked you. He was with you only because it was a bet between us. I told him if he could have you to be his girlfriend for 2 months, then dump you, I'll be his girlfriend afterwards. So, from now on, Qinjing is my boyfriend. Gu Xiao had said in an arrogant way to Guning. It had taken quite a while for Guning to recover from the shock. She asked Qinjing, "Is it true?" Qinjing, who had been looking at her with disdain, replied with intense dislike, "Absolutely. Guning, do you really think I would like you, such a poor girl who has nothing? If it hadn't been for Xiao, I would not have bothered to give you a glance. You're disgusting." And now, Guning could barely stand. She had believed she had met her Prince Charming, but it had turned out to be an absurd joke. Guning couldn't accept it. She had run away in shame, but had been caught by a car accident. Her brain had been badly damaged while bleeding endlessly, while the driver had escaped. When she was awake, she became Tangaining. Right at this moment, 2 soft female voices sounded outside the door, and stopped Tangaining from thinking. "Here's 30,000. That's all the savings of me and your brother-in-law, but I don't think it's enough for Ningning's surgery." This was Guning's second aunt, Gu King. She sounded worried. After a few seconds, she continued, "Well, why don't you call our eldest brother?" Gu King said though, she didn't believe it herself. "I already called, but our eldest brother said his money is all in his wife's hands. He's broke too. You know our eldest sister-in-law. Money is her life. One has to kill her first, then borrow her money." Guman felt resigned. Gu Kingxiang, her eldest brother, was the richest one among the family, but also was the stingiest one. It was merely an excuse that his money was all in his wife's hands, and Guman knew it well. "Right, how about our third brother? He said he just bought a new house, and ran out of money. It's all my fault to let Ningning suffer with me. If Ningning couldn't recover, I'll commit suicide afterwards." Guman was in pain and desperation. Although Tangaining wasn't the old Tangaining any longer, she still had her professional skills with her. Thus she was able to hear the voices from outside clearly no matter how quiet they were. And the dialogue touched her. When she woke up this morning, she was busy absorbing the fact that she had been reborn, and she forgot to let Guman know she had already regained consciousness. Tangaining felt guilty about that. Accompanied by a quick sound, the room door was pushed open. 2 middle-aged women of the same age walked in. They were all in common, cheap clothes. Although their clothing was old and worn out, it was clean and tidy. Because they didn't earn much money, they barely took good care of their skin. And they looked much older than their real age. No one would doubt if they said they were 50 years old. "Mom, Aunt." Tangaining opened her mouth first. She didn't feel uncomfortable, because she had totally accepted the fact that she had been reborn. Firstly, she maintained Guning's memories, which reminded her of the deep mother's love. Secondly, she herself held great desire for a mother. Those were the reasons why Tangaining swiftly accepted Guman as her mother. Guman made her think of her own mother. Those two both had been abandoned by a man, but Guman was luckier than Tangaining's mother. Though living a hard life, Guman was alive at least. Chapter 3, Revealed Expectational Function. But when Tangaining, or Guning opened her mouth, Guman and Gu King was surprised. They couldn't believe their eyes, seeing Guning sitting against the head of the bed. The doctor had said there was congestion in Guning's brain, and it must be removed by surgery, but now she woke up herself. Ning, you're awake. Although being surprised, Guman reacted soon. She burst into tears immediately, striding ahead, wanting to hug Guning, but was afraid to hurt her. Thus Guman stood there instead, not knowing where to put her hands. Ning, you're awake. You're finally awake. Gu King rushed ahead as well. It was still unbearable for her, but she felt happy and excited. Mom, Aunt, I'm awake, Guning said, holding Guman's hands in hers to comfort her. Right. What a relief that you're finally awake. Guman cried out of happiness. She clutched Guning's hands in case her daughter would disappear. Gu King was in tears of joy as well. Such a drama was a difficult test for normal human beings. Oh, I'll go find the doctor, Gu King realized first, and ran out directly. Before long, the doctor walked in. He was also super surprised by the fact that Guning was awake. What a magic! But it still needed a comprehensive check to make sure it was real. Therefore, the doctor arranged the exam for Guning at once. After the exam, Gu King went to buy food for Guning, while Guman stayed by Guning's side to look after her. Guning felt the strong mother's love from Guman. It was the first time that she had been taken good care of ever since her mother had been in vegetative state. Although when she had been with Chizu, she had heard of many sweet nothings, they were lies. After the meal, Gu King was gone for afternoon work. And Guman was free for today and tomorrow. She had applied to have the rest separate 3 days break of this month together, when Guning had been caught by an accident yesterday. Guman had talked with Guning for a while before she told her to have a good rest. Guning knew Guman hadn't had any sleep since last afternoon, so she let her catch up on some sleep on a nearby empty bed. Though Guning was awake now, and Guman felt greatly relieved, she was still worried before the final result came out. So Guman was reluctant to take a break. But Guning said if Guman didn't rest, she won't neither. Thus Guman agreed at the end. Guman was literally tired. She planned to lie down to comfort Guning, but fell into a deep sleep in a few minutes. As for Guning, she couldn't sleep at all. She's staring at the ceiling, thinking about what had happened during her last lifetime. All of a sudden, she saw a pair of feet walking by above her head. Guning was astonished and had her mind back instantly, but there was nothing on the white ceiling. Why she had seen a pair of feet walking by above her head? Was it a hallucination? Guning brought her eyes back from the ceiling. She rolled her body, focusing on the nearby bed where Guman was asleep. The woman had withered yellow skin with wrinkles all around her eyes and brow. Guman, who had been living a hard life, never bought herself any skincare products, fine food or expensive clothes. But she would try her best to give Guning the best. Fortunately, Guning was always a good child. Although she was self-abased and introverted, she won't compare with others because she knew her family couldn't afford. However, since Tang Yining was Guning now, she wouldn't allow herself and Guman to stay poor and weak. Additionally, she was going to take revenge, and she must be powerful. She had ambition. Given that her enemy was the Tang family, she must be stronger than it. Although the Tang family was the third richest family in the capital, it was still a super rich family with billions of assets. And in a third-tier city, it must be the top one family. But the Tang family's glorious achievements relied largely on Tang Yining's effort. Tang Yining had done countless illegal things for the Tang family, stealing opponents' confidential documents, killing people, for instances. But Tang Yining had destroyed all the evidence for her own safety the last lifetime. It was impossible for her now to find and use those evidence to accuse the Tang family. Once again, Guning was distracted. She saw a person walking by a short distance away. Guning was astonished again, and had her mind back at once. But there was nobody walking by, but a white wall before her. Was she really having hallucination? No, in addition to a person who was walking by, she had also seen a familiar door with a number plate said 106. The room 106 was exactly the patient room that diagonally across hers. But, how was she able to see the door? Without a reason, she believed it wasn't a hallucination, but the truth. Unconsciously, Guning looked back at the wall. She focused on it. After a while, the wall before her eyes became transparent. She could see the door of patient room 106, the patients who were walking about, the nurses and the doctors. Suddenly, a bold idea appeared in Guning's mind. Was this clairvoyance? Guning was struck dumb by this thought. She had a deep breath. To make sure whether it was clairvoyance or not, Guning immediately moved her sight to another wall. The wall gradually turned transparent, then she saw what were in the room, the patient beds, the patients and the equipment. Now she was sure that it was clairvoyance. But Guning still felt unreal. She wanted more proofs. So she looked around afterwards. All of a sudden, Guning felt a sharp pain from her eyes, then she fell into unconsciousness. In the dream, Guning dreamed herself was sinking after she had jumped into the sea, and the red light from the red jade on her chest. Then, she heard a distant light voice. The aged voice said, "There's an ancient jade named the blood of the phoenix. It's made of the blood of a phoenix and the soul of the earth. It has magical power, which enables you to live forever or be reborn." Suddenly, she woke up from her dream in surprise. What had happened? While Guning was confused, a piece of information dawned on her. After a while, Guning finally figured it out. The blood of the phoenix was made of the blood of a phoenix. Because it was an ancient object, it had a magical power. She could be reborn exactly because of this jade. Chapter 4, The Doctor with a Gun. In her previous incarnation, she had coincidentally picked up a phoenix-shaped red jade. Although she had no idea whether it was authentic or not, Guning had kept it because of her fondness for it. Unexpectedly, the jade had magical power, which resulted in her rebirth. Moreover, blood of the phoenix had been absorbed into her soul, causing her to inherit the power of the jade, as well as a pair of jade eyes. Everything turned crystal clear in her pair of jade eyes. With that power, Guning also gained the ability of clairvoyance and a photographic memory. Spirit chi referred to a type of pure energy that existed in the myriad entities between the heavens and earth, akin to the essences of the sun and moon. There was also a telepathic eye space. It was a still storage room. One could put any dead object before their eyes into this telepathic eye space just by mere thought. Of course, all of those actions, or the use of jade eyes, cost the power. In addition, a person who had the power could live longer, and can use the power to cure injuries and illnesses. The space of telepathic eyes became larger as the power grew, and was able to accommodate more things. Because blood of the phoenix was a jade itself, it needed the power of jade. Jade consisted of nephrite and jadeite. Nephrites included traditional gems like crystals, corals, agates and so forth. Jadeites were mainly emeralds. As long as it has the power of jade, it would be of use. And jade was always popular and common, no matter in the ancient time or modern society. So, it wasn't difficult for Guning to find jade. But, Guning needed a large quantity of jade. Even she herself couldn't calculate the exact number. Thus stone gambling was the only way to satisfy Guning's need. She needed to accumulate the power of jade for her jade eyes. Since she had the jade eyes now, it was so easy for her to win the game of stone gambling. Only by stone gambling, she could win more and more jade to absorb purer and stronger power. At the same time, she could win money by stone gambling. And if she wanted to win money, she could use her jade eyes in other ways. For example, playing dice cup. You could never fail by using clairvoyance. But, it couldn't last long, because a casino had its own rules. There was a limit of winning money. If one won too much money, his or her name would be on the blacklist, or he or she probably would be skilled. So if there was another way to make money, Guning would not gamble, stone gambling surely excluded. Antiques were of great use as well, because antiques normally had a long history with the essence from the sun and the moon. If an antique had the essence, it would be an authentic one. The more essence an antique had, the longer time it must have been existed for. Stone gambling could make you a billionaire or a beggar overnight. Antiques had the same effect. If you accidentally got an authentic one, you would be super rich at once, otherwise you would lose every cent you had. But for Guning, who had gained magical power, those were merely problems. On thinking of that, Guning was more than excited. The magical power she had was so immensely powerful. If she still couldn't achieve anything with the Jade eyes, she would rather die. The scare was also replaced by happiness, for money was easily accessible to Guning now. As for the Jade eyes, it was acceptable too. Ning, are you alright? Hearing the worried voice from Guning immediately got her mind back. She looked at Guman's face, which was full of concern. Mom, you're awake. Seeing Guning was fine, Guman was relieved, but still slightly concerned. I've been awake for a long time, but you seem distracted. I've called your name for several times. You wouldn't react. I thought your brain was damaged again. You sacred me. After Guman's explanation, Guning felt a little ashamed. Well, I just too concentrated on my thoughts. Guman didn't ask any further. She only wanted to see Guning was fine. I'm glad you're awake, that's all I want. It's almost 6 p.m. What do you want to eat? Let me buy for you, Guman asked. I'm not picky. Anything is fine for me, Guning replied. Guman opened her mouth for a second, but didn't say a word. She knew Guning was a good child, who would not indulge herself for expensive food. Then, Guman decided to make the decision for Guning, and buy her some delicious food. When Guman was gone, Guning got off the bed to walk around as exercise. But when she had just walked a few steps away from her patient's room, a doctor who was walking fast with a white coat and mask, knocked her down. Guning stumbled and almost fell. Luckily, she caught the wall at once, and kept her balance. Guning was displeased at first, but then she thought the doctor probably was in an emergency, and didn't knock her down on purpose. Guning planned to forgive him. But to her surprise, the man who had knocked her down didn't apologize at all, and even glared at her, then rushed away. Guning was struck dumb for a second, not because the man didn't apologize and glared at her, but because she had noticed the strong hatred in his eyes. The hatred was not for her. Guning couldn't help but turn around. Her eyes squinted. The man was weird. All of a sudden, Guning saw a gun hidden in the man's waist through his white coat. Guning was worried. Why would a doctor carry a gun with him? And the man seemed he was not a plainclothes police, but an avenger. Although it had nothing to do with Guning, she couldn't step aside since she had found out the truth. If the man was really for revenge, innocent people could be hurt once he shot. On thinking of that, Guning couldn't allow herself to ignore. She wasn't the God, nor the Virgin Mary, but she wasn't cold-blooded neither. And she was willing to help as long as she could. Therefore, Guning followed up quietly. Guning followed the suspect to an office. When he was about to walk in, a young female doctor, who was in a white coat too, walked out, but was stopped by the suspect. Guning fixed her eyes on the movements of the suspect. The suspect pulled out the gun the minute the female doctor appeared in his sight. The gun aimed at her. Due to the white coat, the gun wasn't obvious. But the female doctor's face was as white as a paper now. She was scared. Then the suspect talked to her for a while, and the female doctor reluctantly followed him to another side. Guning followed up immediately. They went upstairs. There were few people in the corridors, because most of them used elevators. And nobody noticed there was something wrong with them. They went straight to the top of the building. It was an open balcony. There was no one else on the balcony, except the suspect, the female doctor and Guning, who was hidden in the dark. Chapter 5, Save People, a check for 500,000 yen. Guning didn't get involved at once. She decided to observe for a while, waiting for a perfect timing. The suspect held the gun, aiming at the female doctor. They were so close. If Guning couldn't catch the suspect quickly, He might feel threatened and shoot, which would cause bad result. Gunning glanced over the open balcony. There was a pile of miscellaneous goods at the right side of the exit. Gunning used it to cover herself, and moved closer to them. Yang Hao, what do you want? Facing the gun, the female doctor was trembling. What do I want? The suspect, Yang Hao, snorted. Then he said angrily with his eyes full of fierceness, and Kian, it's all because of you that I end up like this. What do I want? The hospital has fired me. My wife left me for another man. It's all because of you. Speaking of this, and Kian felt aggrieved. She argued, that's all because of your immoral behaviors. As a doctor, you disobeyed the basic rules. You've secretly accepted the money from the patient's family, and ignored a life. I simply rescued a person. Shut up. That's my own business. You don't have any right to interfere, Yang Hao snapped. His hand around the gun tightened. Now, have someone transfer 5 million yuan to my account, or I'll shoot. And Kian was trembling with fear. She swallowed gun with great force. I don't have that much at all, but I have 2 million yuan. No, I want a total 5 million yuan. That bitch left me exactly for that amount of money. I'll grab her back with the same amount of money. Yang Hao seemed crazily excited, and was likely to shoot. Meanwhile, with the cover of the miscellaneous goods, Gunning had moved to Yang Hao's back, 2 meters away from him. Seeing Yang Hao being emotionally excited, Gunning was startled. She was worried that he would shoot by accident. Yang Hao was unusually excited now, intending to do evil things. What Yang Hao had done today was illegal. Even if he could get 5 million yuan today, he still would be punished by the law. He wouldn't have chance to win his wife back. Besides, his wife wouldn't come back to him neither. And the other man, who had given Yang Hao's wife 5 million yuan, must be a man of great wealth. If Yang Hao's wife had left him for money, she certainly wouldn't leave a wealthy man for him. Even if Yang Hao's wife didn't care about the money, Yang Hao was a suspect now. He would be caught and put in jail sooner or later. If Yang Hao's wife chose to stay by his side, she would lose both Yang Hao and the money. Gunning was now worried and Kian would say something that would irritate Yang Hao. The man could lose his control and shoot. Then, Gunning wouldn't have chance to save her. Fortunately, Kian was smart enough to notice Yang Hao was emotionally excited. She softened her voice and comforted, no problem, I'll transfer 5 million yuan to you, but I only have 2 million yuan on my account, and I need to call my family for the rest. As long as she could survive, she would pay 5 million yuan for it. She believed the police could catch Yang Hao later. Gunning thought otherwise. Yang Hao wasn't dumb to let go of Kian. If he did so, Kian must call the police afterwards. Accordingly, even if Yang Hao could get the money, he couldn't get away with it. Hearing Kian agreed at the end, Yang Hao was relieved. Great, but you have to use the speaker. Sure. Kian pulled out her phone, trembling still. Yang Hao seemed a little tired after holding the gun for a long time. He loosed his hand. Right at that moment, Gunning seized her chance. She rushed out rapidly to Yang Hao. The latter was knocked down on the floor directly, due to his lack of preparation. The gun in a loosened hand was thrown out as well, and fell down several meters away. It all happened too fast. Kian was struck dumb without knowing her phone was dropped on the ground. But it was not the end yet. Without the gun, Yang Hao was merely an opponent to Gunning. Before he could fight back, Gunning hit Yang Hao into unconsciousness. In case he might be awake later, Gunning found a rope and tied him, plugging his mouth with a rag. Call the police. Gunning looked at Kian, who had no idea what to do. Oh. Right. Kian finally got her mind back, and found her phone was missing. She stood still for a while before finding out her phone was lying on the ground. She immediately picked it up. But before she could dial out, her phone rang. Kian was startled. She saw the caller's name, and answered it at once. Hi, Dad. Kai and Kian, where are you now? I'm at the open balcony of inpatient department. and Ki-on told her father what had happened. Then she asked, "Dad, shall I call the police or?" Gunning frowned. She didn't understand why Ki-on said that. What else did she want to do except calling the police? What? How is this possible? Are you alright? And Ki-on's father was extremely worried. His heart was in his throat now. "Dad, I'm fine now." And Ki-on replied. "Wait for me. I'll be right there. And, do not call the police now." And Ki-on's father said. And Ki-on agreed, then hung up the phone. Gunning had good hearing. She had heard clearly what Ki-on's father had said. When Ki-on finished her call, Gunning asked with puzzle, "Why don't you call the police?" "Because if I called the police, the whole hospital would know it. The people would be alarmed, which is the last thing I want to see." And Ki-on explained. Gunning thought it was reasonable, so she closed her mouth. And Ki-on added, "But, Yang Hao will definitely be sent to the police station, in private. I've already recorded the dialogue between us. His fingerprints were also on the gun, which is the proof too." Recorded? Gunning now was respectful of Ki-on. Being in such a dangerous situation, she was still able to record. "By the way, thank you so much for saving my life." And Ki-on thanked Gunning sincerely. She drew out a check and a pen from her clothing, writing on it for a second, then gave it to Gunning. "I don't know how to thank you actually. This is a check for 500,000 yen. Please take it." Gunning stared at the check. She frowned. Although she badly needed money now, she wasn't willing to accept the check. She had her own principles. Since she had given out a helping hand on her own initiative, she didn't ask for payment. Gunning refused with determination. "I didn't save your life for money. Please take this check back." And Ki-on was surprised. But she didn't doubt whether Gunning rejected the check because it wasn't enough. She felt the kindness from the young lady instead.